Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is a very special, one-of-a-kind of event where we get to meet with a fantastic Portland area collector, Jordan Schnitzer. Look around and you'll see this amazing show that I'm not going to speak about because Mr. Schnitzer is going to cover that very well. Now, ladies and germs, I'd like to introduce to you a fantastic collector and art connoisseur who has generously provided us with this exhibit that you get to see today, Jordan Schnitzer.
Does everybody have chairs? Because I know how much I hate standing when I can sit and listen, but thank you for having me. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about where I grew up and how I got into art, then the current program, and then maybe spend a minute or two on a few of the pieces, because there are others here that could probably speak far better than I could. So I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I grew up in Portland. I'm an only child. My father started our family real estate business in 1951 that I run. We have offices up and down the West Coast, so I'm pretty busy running a fabulous real estate business that had a pretty tough time during the recession, but markets are coming back. When I went to first grade as an only child, my mother had time on her hands, so she decided to do something between 9 and 12. And when she checked around, the only program that fit those hours was at the Portland Art Museum. There was an art school in the art museum then. It's now been spun out and called Pacific Northwest College of Art. So she went to art school. And that began this magical journey. I was in first grade and she started coming home with canvases and oil paint and charcoal, and I was babysat by a number of the artists. And the only problem was I had a little shop in the basement of the house where I used to make these little, wooden aircraft carriers and all these things, and suddenly she took over my workshop. So it was really a fun period, and I'd go down sometimes after school and meet her, and I'd go in the classrooms, and there were the artists, and they were all wearing their smocks, and they had the easels up, and it was really a lot of fun. Well, after a couple years, some of the key artists in Portland who were teaching, and most artists in most communities realized they generally have to have a day job to support their passion until they're much more successful. They complained that in the early 60s there was not a contemporary art gallery in Portland. The Art Museum had a rental sales gallery, but there wasn't a gallery. So she, along with my grandmother, her mother, Helen Director, opened the Fountain Gallery of Art, so named because it was located in the cheapest real estate in Portland, which was in the Old Town part, in a building called the Newmarket Theater. It was built in 1888. And the most wonderful thing about that building was that in the basement of it, it was all dark and all these wood, all these big stone sort of foundation things. It was always dark and scary. And I would go down with a staple gun and sort of shoot these pirates that were still there from the 1840s. But she opened the gallery in 1963, and for the next 25 years did a marvelous job in Portland and in Seattle. She had a gallery there for a little bit of time too, helping people understand the importance of having art in their lives. Art in their homes, art in their businesses, and really help change the face of art in Portland and in the Northwest. The benefit to me was we started having lots of art at home. And I'd go to the openings, and the artists would make a big deal, and I'd look at the art. And so, as I've said, and I could say in conclusion, I can't imagine waking up without art around me. It's become so integral to my life, so I feel awfully blessed. So after 25 years, she decided she wanted to go on and do more philanthropic things and spend a little more time with my father as he began to retire, and she closed the gallery. In hindsight, it actually was an adjustment for me, because the gallery was maybe like a sibling rival. My mother, I had a working mother. I mean, she'd be out of the house before my father in the morning, You know, she'd be on the phone at 10 o'clock at night when an artist had a problem with a toothache, and she'd get on the phone and call a dentist friend and say, would you trade, you know, some dental work for a painting? And, I mean, being a gallery owner, for any of you who know gallery owners, it's a 24/7 job. And she had worked at it so hard, so when she closed the gallery, I felt a bit adrift. Now, I knew I wanted to continue what I had been taught, which was how important it is for all of us to support local artists in our communities. So my first love of art is art of the Northwest, art of the region I grew up in, and I continue to add to that collection. And I think the artists in the Northwest, people like Rick Bartow, who's here, are just as good as anything on these walls. But not everybody's going to be in New York or LA, and not everybody's going to be at the right place at the right time and promoted the right way to sort of move on up to this national and international level. But I love the art of the Northwest, and I don't differentiate at all between, I like good art. And if it's a regional artist, if it's a national artist, I love art that moves me, like the work that's in this room. So she closed the gallery. I was feeling a little drift, and I was on the Portland Art Museum board. I've been on 33 boards. I spend about a third of my time on civic stuff. And I came up to a gallery where there was a print exhibition. And I walked in and saw the works by David Hockney and Stella and Warhol and all the big names. And I thought, I've been so committed to buying art of the region, first because I loved it, and second of all because I got a big family discount. I thought this might be fun to start buying prints of the New York school. So I went down to a local gallery in Portland called the Ogden Gallery, and I bought a small Frank Stella, I bought a Jim Dine, and I bought a David Hockney from a series he did called the Blue Guitar Series. And it was really fun. And the prices were reasonable. This was now in the late 80s. And I went back the next week to buy a few more and a few more. And as I told part of the staff today, someone usually says, well, where were you putting it? And I would say, come on now, with a mother as an art gallery dealer, I heard her say 1,000,000 times to Nancy, gee, Nancy, if you love this work, and you're saying you don't have room for it, don't pass it up. Buy it and rotate something or put it under the bed, but don't let it go. If you feel that the work is speaking to you, buy it. So I'd blown through wall space before I'd finished college, so wall space wasn't an issue. And I had a storage area then for a lot of the art, so I just kept buying prints. Well, I'd also been on the board of the University of Oregon Art Museum, having graduated from there before I went to law school in Portland. And the director at the time, a man named David Robertson, knew that I was collecting some prints and asked if he could borrow some for an exhibition. I said, sure, great. So he came up and went through a little binder that I kept with the 300 prints I had at the time, nothing like the 8,000 we now have. And he borrowed 56 prints. And I went down to the gallery, which was about the size of this space, and it was so exciting walking in and seeing the works up, most of which had been in storage. 2 of them came from the house, and most of us don't have walls like this. And it was wonderful the way the curator, Larry Fong, had arranged the work just like the creative way that this is hung tonight. And I thought, it doesn't get any better. Until people started coming in, and especially the kids. I saw there you are. And there was a young boy, a tiny bit older than you, with his dad, just like that, looking at a work by an artist named Robert Longo. And Robert Longo did a series called Men in the Cities, where he took his models, got them in a room, he got a tennis ball machine, and he started shooting tennis balls at the models, to which they were ducking and moving, to avoid being hit by the tennis balls. He took photos, and based upon those photos, did this series. So there was an image of a man called Eric that's like this, and the young man was sitting in front of it, and I scooted down and I said, what do you think's going on there? Is that guy dancing and rocking out, or is he twisting in pain? And the young man thought for a minute and said, I think he's dancing, to which I said, I think you're right, because each one of us would have said to whatever he would have answered, I think you're right. And the light went off then, that growing up in the Northwest, it's not like I grew up in Manhattan, and I often ask this, I'll ask it right now. So, is there anyone here that grew up in Manhattan? Huh? Well, if there were, did you? Did you? So let me just ask, you remember that thing, you don't ever ask a question you don't know the answer to, but, so you grew up in Manhattan? So, do you remember the first time you went to a museum?
I was probably too young to remember. My mother was.
Okay, so you just answered exactly the way I wanted you to. Okay, so far I'm okay. Now the second, so the answer was, you don't remember, you were too young, your mother was a painter. So the fact is, you can't remember when you went to a museum, because growing up you always went to museums, didn't you? Right. Now tell me, do you remember the first time you saw a mountain?
I was 5.
That's right, you remember it, don't you?
Yeah.
Now who grew up in Missoula? So let me ask you, do you remember the first time you saw a mountain? You don't, do you?
Not really.
Because I mean, you wake up every day and there are mountains all around you, aren't there? Okay. Now, do you remember the first time you went to a museum?
Oh, yes.
Great, I got just the answers I wanted. It's okay. I better quit while I'm ahead. Thank you, enjoyed it. Okay. Okay, this worked out just perfectly because that's generally what happens if we're in the Northwest. Okay, and I'm sure there are of the 8, 9, 10 million people in the greater New York area. I'm sure there are several million people that have never been to a museum, and it's a shame that they haven't. But the fact is that if we're talking right now, at least in a similar kind of socioeconomic level, when you're in those kinds of cities like New York and whatever, you go to museums. It's just secondhand to you. That's what people do. Whereas for those of us in the West, we have a whole different relationship with nature and the outdoors. And for most people in the West, going to places like this to see stuff is a little more of a foreign experience. It's sort of like it's some elitist thing. It's for somebody else. So when that light went on that evening in Eugene, I said, you know, since I love buying art, and this has been pretty fun buying these prints now, in addition to still being committed to our local Northwest artists, wouldn't it be nice to develop a preeminent private contemporary collection that I could make available for free, philanthropically, to university museums and regional museums? So that's what led to this whole program I'm on. Now, I didn't sit there with some strategic plan. It just was, that would seem like a nice extension of my passion and sharing it with others. In the intervening years, a number of things have happened where first the program now is developed where we generally have 4 or 5 exhibitions like this traveling at any one time. So I now have 3 people that work full-time, that do it all in essence for free. We have right now a Chuck Close exhibition in Oklahoma City Museum. We've got a Jasper Johns exhibition in the University of Virginia Museum. I had a huge exhibition at Sotheby's 2 weeks ago. And I've got a Carol Walker exhibition that started at the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento, is now at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at the University of Oregon, and then it goes to 4 more museums. We've got another 8, 10 shows planned for the next 3 or 4 years. So this is part of what I do civically, and just love it. Just the joy of coming in and first seeing the work up. It's always sad when we leave, like it will be Friday morning, you know, because at least this goes to another place or two, but it's so much fun to see the work. So that's the program we have now. We continue to buy prints and multiples and have exhibitions like this. Now there may be a couple of questions, and I'll presuppose what a few are, and one is why do I buy prints and multiples? Well, with the Northwest collection I buy oils, any medium. And if I'm asked why I wouldn't buy the oil paintings of Chuck Close, for instance, or of Andy Warhol or Richard Serra or whatever, I'd say, well, 2 things. First of all, even if I had the money, which I don't, to spend $40 million for a Liechtenstein painting, okay, even if I had the money, that's been done. There are some amazing collections. Eli Broad's collection, the Saatchi collection, the Steve Cohen that's having some SEC problems, that's a huge collection. The Meyerhoff collection that's going to the National Gallery that has the 5 big artists of Ellsworth Kelly, Jasper Johns, Rauschenberg, and Frank Stella. So that's already sort of been done. And that was done when they bought that work in the 60s and 70s. It was still expensive. You know, it wasn't a bargain. I mean, it was a bargain compared to today's prices. Okay, but programmatically, it's quite different. As amazing as Eli Broad's collection is, and he may have 4 or 5 of the best Liechtenstein paintings. Okay? What he can't do, that if Laura called up and said, boy, we loved your show, we'd like to do a Liechtenstein show, I'd say, okay, what do you want? We've got 300 Liechtenstein prints, and we got the first one he did, and the last one he did, and a whole bunch in between. And not having an art history degree, I love the survey shows like this, but I also like the individual shows where it's easier for me to get into the mind of an artist when you see and are surrounded by an awful lot of their work. And therefore, I've been able to, within my means, be able to acquire an awful lot of work by all these artists. The Chuck Close show, they're just 2 pieces that are not in that show. This is one of them. There are 87 works in that show. So you go to that show in Oklahoma City, and you can really see, my gosh, all the different techniques he's used, starting back over the last 35 years. And it just helps me, and I think others, really get into the artist. Okay. The second thing that's happened is this, that on the technical side, after that Loma Linda earthquake in California, and next with that terrible tragedy about 9/11, all the insurance companies went through, and from their statisticians doing the analysis about risk, the risk analysis, is they realized, my gosh, first, there are a lot more places subject to earthquakes than we imagined, and also with that horrible, horrible terrorist attack, places we never thought were vulnerable might be, and therefore, in essence, they raised the premiums of these big shows. Okay, so insurance costs went way up, but at the same time, on these modern masters of the last 50 years, for lots of reasons, their prices went up astronomically, that if your wonderful director here decided to do a Liechtenstein show of paintings, and you wanted to fill this room with paintings, you'd have $800 million, $1 billion of paintings. And it cost you $3 or $4 million for insurance. So the advantage, again, of the works on paper, that while they've had appreciation, haven't gone crazy like the works on canvas, which make it almost prohibitive, other than the biggest institutions, to have those giant shows. So it actually has caused even more importance of our getting work out to all these different communities. Another point, and I'll ask for some questions and we'll move around, is this. One of the other reasons I love works on paper is the collaboration. And I was at the Matrix today up at the university and watching the, was he here? Who?
Jason Clark?
Jason
Yeah.
Clark.
He's not with us tonight.
He's coming tomorrow night, right? I think he said. It was wonderful seeing the students working on doing the prints and with blocks and stuff. Is that, you know, prints have been around for 500 years. I mean, you can get these Rembrandt, these, you know, older prints and so forth. But post-World War II, something amazing happened. And that was there were a number of artists who loved being artists, but maybe realized they were better technically and could help other artists produce their work. So a woman named June Wayne started a thing called a Tamarind. And then you had a thing happen where Kathleen Brown in San Francisco started Crown Point Press, and Sid Felstein and Stanley Grinstein started Gemini, and you had Tanya Grossman start ULAE. In other words, around the country, 4 or 5 of these really significant publishers. In other words, where artists would go, and they had master printers there to work with that artist and say, gee, Ellsworth Kelly, gee, Roy Lichtenstein, gee, Chuck Close. You know, Chuck Close would have an idea, and he'd say, how do we do this? And they'd say, well, it's never been done before, but let us spend some time figuring out technologically how to do it. And my view is any technique that an artist can use to get his or her message out, more power to them. So this wonderful thing happened, this collaboration with these publishing houses and these artists to push the envelope as to creating these wonderful works. The work by Chuck Close over here, that work has 111 impressions. Meaning, you know, they had, you know, he made the original image of what he wanted, and then it had to go through 111 times where it'd print one color, it'd dry, and a couple days later print it again. I mean, it takes you 2 years to do that print. Some of the other ones he's done take 178 impressions, 156 impressions. Now, aside from his being basically a paraplegic, okay, so in his case it's even worse, but even if he weren't, he wouldn't be able to take the time to do 150 impressions of that 111 times. Okay. So I think the point of the collaboration, the magic of the printers and the publisher and the artist just adds an extra special meaning for me about how these works were created. Any questions?
Was that job closed down with a photo emulsion? All of those screens, were they separate photo emulsion screens?
Wow.
Or did they use traditional block outfit screens?
I don't know. Yeah.
Whatever they did, it was masterful.
Yeah.
And their ability
Yeah.
to register 111 screen plates is totally phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. And especially, we don't have one here, but his paper pieces were phenomenal, where he'd, take those old screens from fluorescent lights that had all the little squares, put those down, and he'd take what you do make with cakes with, the way you squeeze the frosting out, and he'd come up with his special paper mix, and he'd squeeze the paper, the technicians would, into these squares to get all the different colors. I mean, he's been brilliant. It's interesting about Chuck Close. He's written and said that most people are problem solvers. He likes to be a problem creator. He'd always be going to his publishing house and say, I've got a new idea. How can I do this with a printer multiple? So a brilliant, brilliant man. Any other questions?
You only buy multiples?
What now?
You only buy editions, you don't buy series? This looks like a series.
Oh, no, I like to buy the entire set of an artist's work. So for instance, with Andy Warhol, when you did the Marylands, the Mals, all those, we have all those sets. Because as I've often said, if I were blindfolded and we put a list on the wall of all 8,000 or whatever it is right now, and I threw a dart, and it landed on any one of them, I'd feel like I was the luckiest person in the world. Just have one. I'm a little luckier, and I'm able to put together this public collection, so I'm buying the sets of these, because that's how Andy Warhol wanted those Marylands and the Mals and the Cowboys and Indians, those things to read, just like the John Baldessari set right there. And each one of them would be neat to have, but it loses the whole meaning of the 12 of them, of the 3 balls, where he had this idea where he wanted to see if he could throw 3 balls up in the air and have them all line up perfectly. So his then wife took the photos while he threw these balls up in the air. So yes, I try to, whenever I really can, buy the whole set when an artist has done a set of works. Yes, sir.
Does your foundation have a website that lists where the various exhibitions are?
Yes, we have a new website. We just went on 2 weeks ago, Suzanne. So our website, it's called?
Oh, jordanschnitzer.org, and you should look because it has the exhibitions and the exhibition schedule, current, and all the news from all of the exhibitions that we've had in the past. It's pretty robust right now. Not to mention social media. Do not forget. Like us on Facebook. Make sure you check our Twitter and check our LinkedIn accounts and our YouTube channel as well.
Suzanne Orton's our head of marketing and is up to speed on all that stuff. For those of us that don't do Twitter and aren't on Facebook, whatever she says, right?
This museum does a fabulous job, so you guys, great credit to this museum for getting the word out.
I
Yes.
have a question about the Andy Warhol. There's no printer information, no signature. Where do you get these? Are these printer proofs that are they monoprints?
Okay, the question was about these Andy Warhol prints over here. And those came from the Warhol Foundation, and those were basically unique trial proofs. And what happened is, after I started buying a lot of work, and I had a Warhol show with stuff I'd already bought, I got a call from the Warhol Foundation, a man named Tim Hunt, who had known Andy Warhol. I hadn't met him. And he said, we have an awful lot of work, and we're looking at this was 10, 12 years, 15 years ago. We're looking at beginning to dispose of it, and we really like what you're doing. And while we have an awful lot of dealers that want this stuff, we'd love it if you were to be so inclined to buy a lot of work, and we understand you're keeping it and you've made a commitment to never sell it, and you're creating this public collection and getting it to all these communities. And I said, you bet. So we went back, and so we bought about 300 things initially, and then another 250. So these were unique things that Andy Warhol had just been trying out and playing with in his factory where he was doing these screen prints.
So you just keep them digitally documented, so as the years go on, people will know what it is, who it is, and that it's original. So it just seems like it's just amazing that it's here. There's no sort of writing.
Right. The question was, are we keeping it digitally? Well, we have all the works. We have them professionally photographed with these colored bars, so you can reproduce them and stuff. And I don't remember right now whether these were in any of the print raisonnés of Andy Warhol. I'm sure they were documented someplace because the Warhol Foundation did a good job documenting everything. Jeff, you might know, but these actually came out of the last tranche when they were finally deciding to close up the foundation, and they called and asked if we wanted to come back, and we got an awful lot of, I guess the new word would be juicy stuff that no one else had that was fascinating. Sometimes the condition of the stuff wasn't the greatest, but it was wonderful stuff. And this is the first time these have been exhibited in this exhibition, the one that started, this show that started in Omaha. And I don't believe these have ever been shown before.
This one, is it hand colored on top of the etching? I'm
The
assuming
Honolulu.
it's not got many colors printed.
I don't think so. That came from Bud Shark from Colorado, a publisher there that does wonderful work, does lots of her work. She publishes one to other places. That one didn't? Huh? I assume that one did.
It says it's a color soft ground and spit by aquatint etching. But that's a lot of color, so it looks hand.
Yeah.
On top. But it's brilliant.
Yeah, they're pretty wonderful artists. Any other questions? Yes.
Sharon, you talked about the Warhol Foundation and others, but many of these artists are still living. And so I imagine that you have forged some relationships with some of them. I'd love to hear some stories.
But I don't, it's interesting. I've not made much effort to meet many of them. First, I'm awful busy with my day job, and I've got daughters that are almost 15 and 17, being an only child. I just am amazed at the amount of drama that two girls can do. I keep thinking, how can I bottle this and sell it? Then I'd be able to buy much more art. Anyway, but I have met a few artists, and the other thing is, one reason, aside from the time issues, I mean, I don't, I've gone to Basel, Miami a couple times. I don't tend to go to the art fairs. I'm just too busy. I do buy a lot of work from the auction houses, and they're wonderful to me, and I'm wonderful to them. I do that telephonically. I've only gone to one auction itself over the 25 years while I bid on all their auctions. We do it on the phone, and we look at the catalogs and call them up and get condition reports. And I usually work with the head of the department because I've worked with them for a number of years. But one of the other reasons I haven't made an effort is the art has served and serves such a wonderful balance for me. Okay? I mean, it often seems that I have all the problems in the world. This recession with our real estate business, oh my gosh, I kept thinking that Ben Bernanke, who just retired from the Fed, that he had a picture of me on his wall and everybody would come in and he'd say, I'm going to get him today. And I kept saying, you're doing it. But 62 years, never had a default, never missed a dime, came out of it. We had 220 folks that work with us. They're fabulous, and the markets are getting stronger now, but boy, that was tough, So I mean, I'm plenty busy, and the art then is a place for me to go, where I don't need anyone. I can just look at it on city streets, go to any museum, and it's been a wonderful balance. And I'll finish with some of this stuff in a minute about why it's so important. But so I haven't wanted to create this nice construct about some artist and meet them, and then find out they're a jerk. And every time I see their work, I think to myself, God, they were so egotistical and so obnoxious. What do I do now? Okay. Now the fact is that the artists, first of all, the artists in the Northwest have been wonderful people. Okay. I think the artists that, they're in these communities and don't have the spotlight like these giant guys and gals. But the ones I have met, like John Baldessari, John Baldessari grew up in National City, which is a working class suburb of San Diego. Italian family. His father would get houses that were being torn down, and he would get all the wood, and John talks about as a young boy, he'd sit on Saturdays and he'd, with a hammer, knock the nails out of the wood so his father could then sell the wood. They had a garden in the back. The mother was the more cultured one, got him into piano lessons, and in 7th grade, 8th grade, asked if he wanted to take an art class. And he said, sure. He takes an art class, likes it, and starts really getting into art in high school and becomes an art major at UCSD and wants to be an artist. He then goes up to Berkeley, LA, and he's teaching the private school, and he's beginning to become disillusioned with art. And he's thinking, I don't know that I can really change lives being an artist. About to give up, a friend calls him up and says, hey, I'm working at a juvenile detention facility for the summer. We need an art teacher. We've got a spot open. He says, well, I don't need to do the summer. I'll need the work. He goes and works at this juvenile detention center. So after he's there for a couple of days, the kids aren't really coming to his art class. He's frustrated. But then they come to him and say, gee, Mr. Baldessari, can you get us the keys to the gym so we can play basketball? And he says, I'll make a deal with you. I'll get you the keys, get you in the gym if you come to my art class the next day. They came to his art class, and suddenly they got just enthralled with the art, and he got so excited, and he realized he could make a difference being an artist. And he's become one of the biggest artists in the world. And while he doesn't like the term conceptual artist, for those of us that talk about him, he deals more with these ideas and concepts. I loved his work from the first time I saw it. I've collected virtually all of it and decided to have an exhibition of his work. In essence, went through his dealer in Los Angeles, Gemini Publishing, went very close to him, and they introduced me to him, and he is an incredible man. He taught at Cal Arts and UCLA most of his career till his late 60s. And he's that quintessential teacher, always patient. I've been in press conferences with him where he's been asked the most inane question, and I want to sit there and say, don't you know who you're talking to? What a stupid question, okay? He just calmly tries to answer it. And a wonderful man. We were just seeing Ellsworth Kelly, who's going to be 91 in May for the third visit 2 weeks ago. Incredible. Would just sit at his knee and just listen to him talk. So the artists that I have met have been incredible. Incredible so far. So we'll slowly begin to ramp up, meeting a few more. Any questions? Well, let me finish with this. The reason why I like contemporary art is because it is art of our time. If you think about artists, they've always been chroniclers of our time. Go back in history. They always were the ones that were dealing with the political themes, the mores, all the issues. And furthermore, I know you've all heard someone come in and see this Richard Serra or the Barbara Kruger or whatever and say, ugh, why can't they do this nice landscape? Why can't they do this painting like Renoir, Van Gogh or something or whatever? And people forget that when all those artists, Matisse, whoever it is, when they were doing their work, they were contemporary artists. They were artists of their time. And generally, those artists weren't well received. Look at Van Gogh. He's been written up so much. He died penniless and without any recognition. Okay? So artists are always doing contemporary work. And that work is of the time. Now, it's tough to be an artist too. I know there's some of you here, so I shouldn't be talking, we should be asking you. But if you think about it, first you've got to have something inside you that is burning to come out. Don't you need to be willing to say, hey, I want to do something and pour my guts into a sculpture, print, painting, whatever it is, and put it up there where everyone can see it and just rip my guts out, right? So you first got to have that passion, just like Rick Bartow does, and some message that you want to get out. But then you've got to figure out a different way to do it. Because if these Donald Judds look like, Matisses, we'd say, well, that was a clever show to do, fake Matisses and fake Renoirs and fake whatevers. But we've already had those John Singer Sargents and Norman Rockwells and whoever they all are. So if you want to be an artist, you got to do it a different way. What I say to some audiences is think about if Tim, if you came to me and you said, Jordan, I want to write the next great American novel. That's great. And you said, you're a friend, and I was a literature major, loved American novel, and if I wrote this draft, would you read it? And I said, sure. Okay, so you come back a couple months later and you give me this draft, and I read it. And then we get together. And you say, what do you think? What do you think? And I say, well, it is a really good read. I really liked it. And I love the storyline, and it seemed to read an awful lot in terms of the cadence of the sentences and your words, an awful lot like Hemingway. And you say, well, yeah. And you say, well, what I did is I went on the web, I looked at all the authors of the last 100 years, and who has sold the most and keeps selling consistently, and Hemingway is right up there. So I tried to sort of emulate his style. Well, I guess what I'd say is, well, guess what? That Harry's Bar has that Hemingway competition every year, and it's $50,000, and I think you've got a good chance of winning. But if you want to write that next great American novel, then you've got to figure out your own style that's unique to you. Because we've already had a Hemingway. We've already had a Donald Judd. We've already had a Chuck Close. We've already had a Baldessari and a Sarah Morris and a Barbara Kruger. So it's plenty tough to be an artist. The second thing, as I said, the reason why I like contemporary art is this is art of our time, my time. When I see these works reach out and speak to me. I like art that grabs me emotionally. I like art that makes me laugh. And I like art that's just like maybe Sam Francis's work. His earlier, more minimalist work, I think, is very powerful. The later work, which I love, I feel like I'm walking through a garden. It's just beautiful. Doesn't have the intense message that some of these other works have. But I like work that somehow just grabs me. Because I think what happens, whether consciously or unconsciously, it takes me away from, in essence, myself and all the issues I have, like all of you have. And for that one moment, I'm not thinking about my daughter Audrey and some issues about her friends. I'm not thinking about my older daughter Ariel and oh my God, what business, whatever all this. And for me, those little mini vacations, and I know that something's happening inside me that I think I end up thinking things through more clearly, and I think maybe hopefully being a better person by having these artists work on me. So with that, the last thing I'll do is before, because I'll get too embarrassed, so I will be presumptuous here. And if you were, which you might have thanked me for bringing the art here, I'm not going to let you because I will tell you this story. So 2 years ago, the way this show really happened was I was having lunch at a eating club in Portland, and I saw Brian Faricio, who's the director of the Portland Art Museum. And I went over to say hello to him, and he said, I think you should meet this guy, Toby Jervix. And I said, oh, hi, Toby. And Brian said he's the contemporary curator of the Joslin Art Museum in Omaha, which I had not heard of. And Brian said, those of us that are in the American Association of Museum Directors, I think it's what it's called, we have a mentorship program where we pick, or somehow they pair us up with curators from different museums for 2 years so we can help maybe create new museum directors. And I said, well, Toby, why don't you come over to the office? So he came over to the office, went into our little art room where I have all these works in binders, in addition to the software package. And he started looking at it, and he said, I think my director, Jack Becker, might want to talk to you because, gee, if you're willing to loan us some work for a show. I said, I've never been to Omaha. It'd be fun to go to the Midwest. And so a week later, Jack Becker called. Comes out 2 weeks later, goes in the conference room, picks a bunch of binders, picks a bunch of work, says, what do you think? I said, the only problem you'll have with me, as I've said to other curators or directors, is I love what you picked, but you've left out this one and this one and this one and this one. And he said, we only have so much room. I said, okay. So that's how this show got put together. And I said, that's wonderful. If we ship it back to Omaha, you must know other directors there. Why don't you call around to your friends? And he called and went to Wichita, Salt Lake, and out of Missoula. That's how this show got here. So we're very indebted to Jack Becker and your relationship with all these museum directors. Okay. And the last piece about the thank you is this. So a fellow came up to me a year ago summer, so 2 years ago in the summer, from this coming summer, and said, boy, introduced himself. He said, I'm on the board of the University of Virginia Fralin Art Museum. And that's where Jill Hartz, who's the director of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art in Eugene, came from. I said, oh, great, yeah, she's doing a wonderful job. And he said, could we ever have an exhibition? I said, love to, never been there either. So about 3 months later, a woman named Jennifer Farrell, who's the curator of the Fralin Art Museum on the University of Virginia campus, came out. And she came out for 2-3 days and went through all the binders again and decided she wanted to do a Jasper Johns exhibition. And while we have Jasper Johns in this exhibition, have had his work in many, we've never done a sole Jasper Johns exhibition. I said, that's great. And she's very, very bright, very pretty, nice woman. And so she's getting ready to leave. And my collections manager, Catherine Malone, who I wish were here, but we're getting all that work back from Sotheby's, and she had to take it all in to make sure it's all okay, so she couldn't come. And Catherine has worked for me for like 10 years now, and her husband's head of our IT department, and she is so much fun to tease. I mean, she's so bright and so wonderful and great temperament, isn't she? So, I love teasing, okay? So Jennifer Farrell from the University of Virginia is getting ready to leave, and she says, Jordan, she over and over, I just can't thank you enough, and is this really true? You're going to loan it for free, and you'll pay shipping one way, and you'll provide brochures. I said, yes, 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 yes. So it was wonderful, it'd be wonderful, 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 wonderful. So she left finally and got in the elevator. And I turned to Catherine and I said, she's a fool! And Catherine looked at me like, how could I be so rude? I said, she's a fool! She said, what, Jordan, what are you saying? I said, think about it. She's thanking us, okay, for loaning the work. She's loaning us her museum for free. So we can have all the work up. So with that,
Very sweet, and okay, I'm appropriately humbled. I do have to say, though, that the value you place in community and education is exemplary. And so thank you, because I think what isn't necessarily obvious to viewers here is not just the lending of the exhibit, but the grants that Jordan gives for education outreach, and just his true deep down belief in community and youth, and thank you for that. Let's just casually adjourn, and please
let the art work.
ask some more questions. Yeah, ask some more questions of Jordan, and enjoy.
Thank you.
Come on in. Okay, so you guys are going to put your backpacks here and put your coats over there. And did you get to watch the video? Yes. You watched the video of the man that was talking about his collection? Because he's here. He's going to talk to you. Okay, so you guys watched the video of Jordan Schnitzer, and he's the man who started collecting art. He wanted to share it with people, so he lends it to art museums, which is kind of cool, isn't it? And it's some pretty special art that usually you wouldn't get to see unless you went to a big museum in a big city. So it's kind of special for us. You guys have a special treat this morning. This is Jordan Schnitzer, and they did watch the video.
You did?
Yeah, it's really easy for the teachers to just stream it right from their computer, so it's pretty excellent. So you've kind of met him before, right?
Well, good morning. So raise your hands. How many of you have been to the museum before? That's great. And when you came last time, what was here? What did you see? Hayden, what do you think? What did you see when you were last time?
Last time what I saw here is I saw there was quite a bit of paintings, more than there is now.
Uh-huh. Yes?
Not like a lot of Native American paintings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you went home and you told your parents that what you did during that day, what did you tell them? Jackson, where's Jackson? Let's see, well, there you are. What did you tell them?
I saw a lot of pictures and explained.
So what's neat about coming to the museum, other than getting out of school, huh? Mason?
You get to see all the art that everybody's like made over the years.
Yes?
It's kind of like a trip back in time.
Hey, that's a good place to start. So let's think about artists for a second, okay? Because you guys also do a lot of reading, don't you? You read lots of books, okay? And you read books, they're about stories, aren't they? And sometimes those stories are historical, about real facts, and sometimes they're fiction, made-up stories, like you guys probably write. Well, art, sort of think of it the same way. Artists are making stories, but they're doing it on canvas, or in sculpture, or prints. There are all sorts of different ways. And if you think about that for a second, artists are always trying to reflect the ideas of what's in their head, of what's going on in the world around them. Just like right now, how many are into sports? Okay. Do any of you do ballet dancing, or any sort of piano or music? Okay. And you all go to school, right? So if someone said, write about your life right now, it'd probably talk a lot about sports, your parents, brothers, sisters, friends, okay, skiing. I bet most of you ski because you live right near all the snow, huh? Well, the artists are doing the same thing. They're doing work about the things in their life. So always think about that when you look at their work. Always ask why. Why did this artist make it look like that? That's what I do to try to figure out. It's like being a detective. You're trying to figure out, why is the artist doing what they're doing? What are they trying to tell me? Yes, Hayden?
They're trying to make more money, and they're thinking what their thoughts are trying to put into them.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Yes. Artists, like everybody else, need to buy clothes and buy food and survive, so yes, they want to sell their work. But I think most people that go into the art field realize they probably won't make as much money as people that do other things. But in life, you got to make enough money to provide for yourself and eventually maybe a family, but you also have to do something that makes you feel good in your heart. And that's why I think most artists really become artists. But let's talk about art. So there's all kinds of art. You guys, do you take art classes? Do you make art?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Each one of you is an artist. Just like these people here. Because how do you think these folks started? What do you think? How'd they start?
In school, probably.
That's right. That's right. Yes, Christian, what do you think?
Like me, just doodling and drawing and maybe writing comics in your spare time or learning about it in school, kind of like I like to do.
Yeah. Grace?
Taking art classes.
Yep, taking art classes. I bet you if we talked to each one of these artists, I bet they doodled in their notebooks and on paper, and I'm sure they all took art classes. Yes?
Yeah, like a crayon to the wall.
Mm-hmm. They probably did. So these artists that you see here, they all started just like you. And while they may have had dreams of becoming a big national and international recognized sort of art star, I don't think they all thought when they started they'd end up being as important in the art world as they are now. But the point is that each one of us can be an artist. And they're all different levels of being an artist. Just like every time when you write a story, okay? That probably isn't going to be published in the New York Times bestseller list, but that doesn't mean that your story isn't an important story for you. So when you all do your art, realize that the art you do for yourselves is just as important as any of these artists that are up on these walls. But these artists now, and let's talk about a few of them, They took art in grade school and high school, and most of them all went to college and got an art degree. Okay, and they usually studied with important artists. And then they had something special about them. Because to be an artist, as I talked earlier, you need to have some message you want to get out. Each one of these artists is trying to tell you something. And it's sort of like a secret. And that's why you have to sort of look at it and discover it. And then they had to do it in sort of a different way. So each one of these artists that's here has sort of figured out a unique way, and that's what sort of made them sort of famous. Okay? So with the artists that are here, these are all American artists. They're all people that grew up in this country. And most of these artists, most of them are alive today. There are probably about, maybe a quarter of them that sort of already passed away, like Andy Warhol over there. But these artists, the work in this room was all done from like 1950 on. Okay? And if you think about the themes of 1950 on, 1960, 70, 80, 90, 2000, because you guys were all born in, when were you born?
2001.
2001, that's right. Well, there's a lot of work here that was done in 2000 on, okay? So for you, some of this work is historical, and some of it is work of the time you were born. So let's talk a little bit about the work. First of all, these are all prints, okay? Yes, Kristen?
I know sometimes do artists like to do something really simple, like over there. Honestly, I don't get it. It's just a square with a line around it or something.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question.
I honestly don't get what makes it art, and that's not an insult.
No, that's the best question you could ask. So let's start right there. That's a man named Donald Judd. Okay, and Donald Judd, he became known for, you know, when you look at that, there's not a lot going on.
Yeah, can anyone just draw a square?
Well, you know, I think a lot of people could draw that red square, okay? But he was sort of the first one to do it that way. And what he was doing is, art sort of goes in cycles. So sometimes there are people that want to make lots of painting and cover the whole canvas. And other times people want to do very simple things like the word you used. So the word for that kind of art, because it's sort of word minimal, they're doing very simple, minimal. So they're referred to as a minimalist. Can you say that word, minimalist? Can everybody say it? Minimalist.
The stuff behind me, because I think it's pretty.
You like this one? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very interesting contrast. So let's finish with Donald Judd for a second. So he was coming along at a time in the 50s and 60s and 70s where he wanted to break away from the artists that came before him. And so he did work that was very plain and very simple. He did lots of sculptures that were just sort of square pieces. And he did pieces where there'd be sort of like a box, one box over another on a wall. So he had a theme in mind of using color and the white space, okay, to sort of make a statement how art didn't have to be all full of things like this artist, Joe Feddersen. Now, it doesn't mean that one's better than the other.
No, it does.
They just are different. Just like, look at all of you this morning. Look at how you're all dressed. Is anyone dressed the same?
No.
I bet you all called each other this morning, didn't you? Ask each other what you were going to wear, okay? Huh?
No.
Well, how did it happen that you all wore different clothes? How'd that happen? Grace, what do you think?
We're different.
That's right. You're different. Just like the artists are all different, okay? It doesn't mean that, you know, Kristen, you and Mason, you know, that one's dressed better than the other, okay? You just wore different things this morning.
Because I think the clothes are based on people's personalities and what they like and stuff.
You're right. What he said is it's based upon people's personalities. You're doing great. You should come up here and I'll sit down there, okay? And we didn't even rehearse this, did we? No. I swear. Okay. So that's absolutely right. The artists are all like every one of you. They're each a different, unique person. And I'll come back to that theme in a little bit. But that's what's going on there, because sometimes with abstract art or contemporary art, people say, well, gee, I could do that. And oftentimes, you probably could. But this artist got there first. He was the first one to do work in that way. Okay? Now you talk about the work behind us of Joe Feddersen. Okay? He is a Native American. Okay? He's an Indian.
That's probably why there's so many TVs.
You got it. What he's doing is just like these other artists, is he's doing art that reflects the things that he grew up with, themes that are important to him. So if you look at his work, and the neat thing is he's going to be here in about 2 weeks and spend a whole week. And he's going to meet with groups like you, and he'll tell you even better what it is he's thinking and doing. But when I see his work, what I see in his work, tell me, well here, let's see. Tay, tell me, when you look at that, what do you see? What's going on there?
A deer walking.
A deer. What else do you see?
A
Teepee.
A ladder.
A ladder.
A rabbit.
Rabbit.
A person.
Person.
All sorts of colors.
All sorts of colors. Anybody else see anything else? Mason?
Well, I kind of see a whole bunch of Indian drawings, like spray painted on a little bit.
Now, when you were here before and you saw a lot of Native American art, was it older Native American art?
Well, because Corky Claremont's art, and he's quite a bit older for these kids.
Well, you've seen in the museum or other places Indian art that's maybe 100 years old, and beaded work and so forth. That's, you know, that's sort of very different than this. See? Well, this is a Native American, so he's taking themes of his identity, his people, his time, and yet he's doing it in sort of a contemporary way. So the teepee doesn't look like a normal teepee that you would see like a photograph. It's a stylized version of a teepee. And the deer, and the other themes that Tayu came up with there, the people, the rabbit. Okay? So he also has some work in the other room, some glass work that's very interesting, where when you look at it, I shouldn't give it away, but what it is tire tracks. Okay? Because when he thinks about the reservation, he thinks about not on a day like today when there's lots of snow, but on those days in the summer when it's really hot and dusty, and you look in the dust where a truck went by, and it leaves a path. Well, he saw that as a theme that, in his way, defined part of a reservation. And he did some work that shows those tire paths. So in here, I think what he's doing is he's taking all those themes when he thinks about reservations and about Indian life and themes of his growing up, and he reflects them on the art. Now, what's neat about it is, let me see. Give me one sentence of what you see in there.
Native Americans dancing and walking around.
Perfect. And let's see, who haven't I asked yet? What do you see in there? One sentence. Anything you want. Do you see sort of a sun up there in those? Huh? Grace, you want to help her?
I think it's very colorful and unique.
Colorful and unique. And one more, somebody else. So, sure, Max.
I think it's just people just having fun and doing what their daily routine.
So what's interesting now, and we could probably go around the room and ask each one of you in one sentence what you see. Some of you may see the same things, and some of you may see different things. And this is another big secret about art. The reason why that happens is each one of you, as we said, as Kristen said, about personalities and being different, each one of you is a unique human being, aren't you?
Yeah.
Your experiences, Oz, are different than Mason's, right?
Yeah.
So when each of us come and we look at art, we're bringing to it all the experiences we've ever had. So think about it. All the experiences, your family, brothers, sisters, where you've lived, what you do, your grandparents, camps in the summer, whatever it is you have filled your life with. Each time you come and see one of these, you're bringing all of that. And that's why it's a unique experience each time you look at art, because each one of you is different. And that's why whatever you see in this work is right for you. And just because whether it's Mason or Kristen or Lexi see something different, it's okay. And that's the most important thing. If you leave here with one thing from my talking that you remember, is whatever you see when you look at art, it's right for you. So let's get up and walk around and quit sitting down and go look at some other stuff. Yes?
Jordan, we're really fortunate to actually have one of the artists here with us.
Mm-hmm.
And he has agreed to talk about his artwork. So maybe
Fabulous.
we can all gather around
Perfect.
this sculpture here. And Rick Bartow just going to say a few words.
Here, come around the corner, we can go like this.
That's right.
Come around here. Watch that.
So we
Show you
can
something. Come
walk
this way, come
around
this way.
here. And do a little dance for us.
Come on, you dance with me. Bowdum chickeny willy oh. 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 You see, about 1/3 of my life I spent with an old man. And the old man was an old Indian guy. And I met him, and we hit it off. He called me, "Hey, you," for about 3 years. But I stayed in there for about 18 years with him until he passed. When he passed on, he told me what I was to do when he left. And then I met another old man. He's still living down in Sacramento. And he took me out in the bush, way, way out in California someplace, where they were doing the bear dance. And a man turned into a bear. And the bear danced to the people. And with all the children, he'd go around and they'd touch the bear. And the bear would pray for them, in a way with his mind, that they would have health and they would grow up strong. And Powdum Chickeny, that's a bear. Powdum Chickeny, he's getting ready. He's getting ready to be live. So when you're young, sometimes you don't think about it so much. My grandpa Johnny, he shot a bear. I have a picture of him on the woodshed. Now, went to my uncle. Then the uncle came to me. So now I still have what's left of that old bear. Every now and then I bring him out and we cerebell him up a bit. Most of the time I just sit in my chair with him. So what happened? If we don't make something different, then we make everybody the same. So I learned how to use scraps. Oh, my uncle used to get so angry with me. Why are you running off with old post fences? And then one time at the gallery, they sold one of the old post pen things for $1,500. Then my old uncle used to start bringing me old post pens. And I'm not the only one that works in modern. You look here, you see there's a big bug in here working. He's not there now. But you see when he worked in there? Old carpenter was working in there, changing it. It was a bear, because we think the bear is not mean. We think of the bear as the old man that I sat for 18 years with, working with him. He was very sweet. Sometimes he'd be real grouchy when I dropped a tree right on the middle of his shop. And not enough of that. About an hour later, I dropped it in the middle of an old camper full of his wife's canning jar jam. So he put up with me a lot. They can be scary, so there's pointy things on there. And then over here, he's got big teeth. But his eyes, his name in the Wiyot people that I belong to means small on the eyes. So he's got little eyes. And his hands are in there with the human. Maybe he's just dancing that old song, "Hey down chickadee willy-o." Maybe he's just singing that. But it's scraps of paper that other people weren't going to use. And I took them home. And then when I'm thinking about it, I think of the old man that I spent a third of my life sitting with him and work cutting wood, going up hunting. I never killed nothing, but I helped him eat it. So it's a bear, but it's also about the relationship of me with wood. And with the wood, we know that even inside of the wood, there are salmon. They could check this and they'll find out that this tree has parts of salmon that the eagle dropped or the bear dropped, and it decomposed into the tree. So the scientists can tell that different things are in there. And they found that even 100 miles clear back in, they find that inside the trees are still salmon are there. So my mother was non-native, she was a white lady, and my dad was Wiyot, and he happened to die a long time before me. So I'm left with memories of the old bear way, way back on the woodshed. So maybe that's why I became a contemporary art, because it was the only way I knew, and the only one that I could talk about the old bear. And so, pow-dum chickadee willy ho, pow-dum chickadee willy ho. This is the fun, you're gonna like this. Everybody sing with me. Pow-dum chickadee willy ho, pow-dum chickadee willy ho. Get your hands out. Get your bear paws down there, because we're going to do the fun part now. We're going to get to yell in the museum. We finally get to yell in here, and we won't get in trouble with it. So when we do that, when we come to the end of the song, and all of the people would stop, and they'd rear up like the bear, and they go, ah! Okay? Get ready. Get ready. Hey, pay down chickadee willy no, bow down chickadee willy ho, bow down chickadee willy ho. Okay. That's enough. There you go. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. It's a good way to start the day, isn't it?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the MAM. We're so glad you're here, and we knew that you would come out on this intrepid snowy night. We can't let that slow us down, with such a special occasion to celebrate in particular. And I want to acknowledge our sponsors briefly, and then introduce our illustrious mayor to introduce our speaker tonight, Jordan Schnitzer, who is lender of this fabulous exhibit to MAM, and supporter of our programs, and increasingly a very good friend to Missoula. This project has been made possible by Jordan and his family foundations, and also by the First Interstate Bank Foundation here in Missoula, and in Billings. And Timothy Gordon Appraisals is a sponsor as well. And among our, to help support the education programs we're running with this fabulous exhibit, the Art Associates of Missoula. And then our media sponsors, the Missoulian. I'm sure you've seen those beautiful ads for this show, and that is all gratis, thanks to the Missoulian. And just a couple of quick comments. There are 2 artists with us tonight whose exhibits are upstairs. Karen Goulet is with us from Pablo. She's the art teacher at Salish Kootenai College. Please introduce yourself and meet her. Karen, are you in the site? And also Patricia Thornton. Patricia, are you in view here? Okay, just look for a gorgeous redhead. And she is the artist who made those beautiful paintings up there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Engel.
Thank you very much, Laura. It's unusual that I need either magnification or amplification for that matter, but no use of this technology is necessary. Good evening, it's nice to see you. I cannot tell you how relieved I am because for a while I was under the misunderstanding that I was getting the gallery top this evening. And while I have a collection, I think, well, frankly, paint by number is not everyone's thing. And dogs playing poker, but we can talk about that at another time. I am tickled to be here and tickled to introduce Jordan Schnitzer this evening, in no small part because what you see around you, the beauty that you see around you, is the product of generosity and magnanimity and philanthropy. And more, I find less and less that those instincts run deep among folks with means in our society. And so when we stumble upon someone who has those means and those instincts, I think we need to celebrate and applaud them and appreciate them, and then try to get just a little genetic material and attempt to clone them in some way. Because we do have a research university here. Potential. So what Jordan has done and what his family foundation have done here is manifold. First, lots of folks are going to enjoy this work, and this work would not be seen by folks in western Montana, but for the instincts that bring a collection like this to Missoula and other places around the West that wouldn't otherwise receive them. So middle-aged guys like me can stumble through here, and we get to say things like "lick and shine," and we get to finally say "I saw one," and it adds to my cachet considerably. But more importantly, what's happened today and what will continue to happen is that young people, kids, 5th graders in particular, working through the 5th grade art program, not only here in Missoula, that's been active for a number of years, but now through a grant from Jordan and his family foundation, there are kids all over western Montana, kids who would never have an opportunity to see anything like this or experience anything like this, have that opportunity today. And for some of them, maybe even just one of them, it will be life-changing.
Amen.
Right? And that, frankly, is remarkable. So if you're just changing one life, it's a big deal. I suspect this changes lots of lives. I appreciated the quote that I'd seen from Jordan as he described an experience with a young man who was seeing this kind of work for the first time. And this notion that a kid can have a relationship with a piece of artwork and develop his or her own opinions, beliefs, create a world around that belongs to that kid alone is a magnificent thing. And so, We thank Jordan for being here. Thank all of you for being here. Your lingering, continuing, relentless do-gooderness that keeps a place like this alive and mattering in our community, and for enjoying Missoula on a night when there's going to be a blizzard. I will have the plows moving. That shouldn't be a problem. There will be some potholes, and we can talk about those later. But in the meantime, this evening is about art and the joy and quality of human existence that it can bring with it. Thank you, Jordan, for being here. Happy to have you. It's my job to put this on you. What do you got? Then I'll just take this home if that's okay.
We're supposed to go to the university. We went up to the Matrix print program yesterday, but we're going to the university tomorrow. So now that the mayor has told me about this cloning program, because being an only child, I can't wait. Next time my mother calls, I can say, hold on, talk to Jordan number 2. It makes this whole trip. You can keep all the art. I mean, this is fabulous. So anyway, no. Now, I could start and tell you how, as an only child, my mother went to the Portland Art Museum Art School. I could tell you how 3 years later she opened up the first contemporary art gallery in Portland. I can tell you how I was lucky to grow up with art in my life. And I can tell you how years later, when she closed her gallery to do more philanthropic stuff, I continued my commitment to local artists in the Northwest. And I can tell you, as I probably will and end with, how important it is that all of you support local artists in your community, because if we don't, they won't stay in our communities. I could also tell you how I was on the board of the Portland Art Museum after she closed the gallery, came upstairs, saw an exhibition of contemporary prints, and I thought, wow, I'm going to add to my collecting, in addition to art of the Northwest, to start buying prints of the modern masters, okay? And how that led to my buying a few prints and a few more and a few more, until the director at the University of Oregon Art Museum asked if he could borrow some. And I went down to the exhibition, and just as the mayor said, a transformational moment was when a man was there with his young son looking at some art, and I thought to myself, wow, growing up in the West, we're blessed with a relationship with nature. We don't tend to have the pattern of going to places like this and seeing things. And I thought, if I could in my own way marry the passion I have for buying more art, and that came from a mother having an art gallery, if I could blend that passion with really developing a significant program of works on paper and have that available for university and regional museums, that might be a wonderful way to share my passion and try to ultimately, what this is all about, as the mayor said, touch lives, okay? Help others feel the joy that I have with art. But I won't tell you any of that, because I talked 3 or 4 times already about all that, and my God, if the staff had to hear that one more time, they'd sit there and say, don't ever let him back in the state, and I'd like to come back again. So what I will tell you is we're now up to 8,000 prints, and we've developed this program the last really 25 years that's really taken off, where we have 4 or 5 exhibitions like this traveling all the time. 2 weeks ago I was in Oklahoma City. We have an exhibition of Chuck Close, the artist that's over there, but we had all of his other work there. And then we went to Tulsa, where we're having an Andy Warhol show. And then we went to the University of Virginia, where we have a Jasper John show. There's one in here and one in the other room. Then we went to New York, where we had a short 2-week show at Sotheby's of a big survey of all these big artists, but a lot more of them. So what's happened now is we've become really a significant provider of work like this to less served communities. And as the mayor said, and when I was listening to him and thinking about this, and I said this earlier, you know, you all are sophisticated people in this room. You're all supporters of the museum. So you already have gotten it. You already understand how wonderful it is to come here and see the great exhibitions that Laura and her staff put together, and to see new things and be stimulated and puzzled and frustrated and smile and frown and all those things we do when we see art and art objects. But there's so many people out there that don't have that experience. So we're all on this journey together. Not only is it enjoying this work and having these wonderful artists do what they do so well, okay, speak to us in our own unique individual way, but we're also here as supporters of the museum to try to say, how can we help the museum reach out to more segments of this community? So it's nice to not only be involved with something that you love, but to share it with others who have that passion, and then together bring people in like these 5th grade students today, sitting around here. We talked to them. They were Fernwood School. What was it? Fernwood?
Oh, Franklin.
Franklin.
Yeah.
My gosh, they were bright. They asked the best questions, and I mean, it just said it all, seeing them. And then to watch them have an experience with Rick Bartow that I hope you all have in a minute when I ask him to come up here, the fabulous artist that did this work here. And then they went downstairs and started making little prints. My gosh, the educational program downstairs was wonderful. So the program we have, now we have shows across the country. I keep buying more of this work that I love, and it's just a joy to be here and to be sharing all this with you. Now, a couple thoughts. Why do I like this work? Why this versus something else? And why prints and works on paper? So, 2 answers. The first is, this work is all contemporary art. And as I've suggested before, so often people have a hard time with current art. How many times has someone said to you, ugh, why can't they do something nice, some nice landscape, some nice thing that's easy to understand, right? Haven't you all had someone, or yourself?
Brother.
That's right, or even wondered yourself. Well, what you have to remember is, no matter when the artist was working, go back to Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Renoir, Rembrandt, whoever you want, they were all doing contemporary art. They were all doing art of their time, art that reflected issues, themes of their moment.
Farther above the curve.
Just like these artists are now. And these are the artists of the latter half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. They're artists of our time. And there's some different ages in here, but these artists are reflecting the themes, the issues, no different than that Tom Friedman column in the New York Times yesterday morning. Dealing with editorial, they're talking about what's going on in our lives and our world today. So that's first why I like contemporary art, because I see in all this work different ideas, themes. The work shakes me up, grabs me, and makes me stop. Makes me stop and ponder, well, what's going on with John Baldessari and those 3 balls he's throwing up in the air? Makes me wonder about Barbara Kruger and what she's trying to do, or that Richard Serra with that deep, rich black ink that he so amazingly gets on that sheet of paper. Or the Joe Fedderson behind us, who's going to be here in 2 weeks. We're having him come over as an artist in residence. So when the kids from the reservation come over here and the kids from the community, they're seeing from the reservation a Native American who's up on these walls with Chuck Close and Jasper Johns, and he'll be here to say, hey, this can happen to you, Johnny and Fred and Bill and Ann and Mark. And okay, that's pretty exciting to think about. But I like this work because it's work of my time, of your time, that speaks to me. The second thing is why works on paper and why these prints in multiples. You're more sophisticated, but often I'm asked a question of, well, why don't you buy originals? And I'll say, well, these are all original, limited edition prints. The wood block or the etching or whatever is ruined after they do their edition and they're no more made. But are you asking whether I buy paintings? And they'll say yes. And I'll say, well, in the Northwest collection we buy all mediums, and I have some other houses in California where I buy California artists, but for this collection I'm focusing on works on paper. And there are 2 reasons. First of all, today, even if I had the money, which I don't, to buy a Donald Judd for $8 or $10 million or a Lichtenstein for $40 million, that's already been done by some major fabulous collectors that sort of came a little bit before me. People like Robert Meyerhoff and Don Fisher, the late Don Fisher in San Francisco, and giant collectors that have amazing collections of that work that they bought in the 60s, in the 70s, when those artists were emerging and then also pretty successful. But the difference is, as spectacular as Eli Broad's collection that's worth billions of dollars in LA, and he's building a wonderful new museum, as amazing as his collection is, and he may have 4 or 5 Lichtensteins and 4 or 5 Warhols, which he does, and Jeff Koons and others, the difference of what he can do, of what I can do that he can't, and I'm certainly not comparing my collection to his, But from a programmatic and educational standpoint, it'd be phenomenal if Laura called up and said, gee, Mr. Brogue, can I borrow that one big Lichtenstein painting? It'd be a real coup to have it on this wall and say, boy, there's a fabulous painting. Irrespective of what it's worth, it's an amazing work that Roy Lichtenstein did. But if she called me and said, I want to do a retrospective of Roy Lichtenstein, because maybe some people are like you, Jordan, that help understand the artist better when you can see a lot of their work. And if I said, you got it, what do you want? I've got his first work he did on paper and the last work before he died, the Tel Aviv print he donated, and 250 in between of the 480 prints he did. So by concentrating on works on paper, I've been able to acquire much larger holdings of so many of these artists, and in some cases all of their works on paper, and make it more easily available to museums like this. I guess the third reason, I said two reasons, but the third reason is, from a more technical standpoint, is with the explosion in art prices, which I happen to think is terrible and disgusting. Why? Because Steve Wynn from Wynn Casinos, his ex-wife Elaine, you may have read, just bought this triptych of Francis Bacon for $143 million. And it's actually in the Portland Art Museum right now on loan for 6 months. And I think the problem is when something is selling for that kind of money, how do you look at it? I mean, it's amazing work. Francis Bacon was a phenomenal artist, and the anguish and pain in his life that he portrays in his images.
He could have bailed out the Ukraine.
Huh? He could have with that. But the point is, when you see a work that's sold for that much money, how do you look at it and not think about all those dollars instead of thinking about what the artist is trying to tell you and speak to you and hopefully change your life? Okay? So the problem is, in the last 20 years, as we've seen these mega wealth folks that have unlimited resources, and maybe the answer is, let's say, you know, you're worth $20 billion and you want to get a boat, a yacht. And you say, hey, honey, let's get a 300-foot yacht, right? And it's $300 million. And yeah, but this other person has a 400-foot yacht, and this one has a 500-foot yacht. Okay? But there's only one of those Picassos and one of those Francis Bacons and one of those Lichtensteins, so maybe that's helped fuel these absurd prices. Now, the fact is, for museums, that if Laura and the staff here wanted to have a Lichtenstein retrospective of his paintings and sculptures, it'd be $1 billion of art. The insurance would cost you more than your whole budget for a year. So to get Lichtenstein work here to this audience, and especially those fifth graders today, by having the works on paper, it's far easier to do. Okay? So let's switch to maybe the last point, and then I'll...
But wait a second. I'm
Sure.
going to give you a standing ovation.
Oh.
That was good.
Thank you. Well, let's do this. Before I finish, let's ask Rick Bartow to come up. And Rick, would you talk about your piece here? And let me explain something interesting about how this show got to be. Okay, I was in Portland. Huh? So let me.
Just giving a present.
Oh, you said that.
I had to take a minute.
Okay, so let me explain how the show got to be. I was in Portland at a club having lunch, and I saw the director of the Portland Art Museum, Brian Fricio, and he was having lunch with a young man. And I went over and said hello to Brian, because we're big supporters of the museum. And he said, you should meet this man, Toby Jurovics, who was the contemporary curator of the Joslin Art Museum in Omaha, where I had not been. He came over to the office, saw our program, said he thought his director, Jack Becker, would like to talk to me about an exhibition. Jack flew out 2 weeks later, picked out this work, and I said, that's great, you're welcome to have it. We loan all the work for free. And I said, as long as it's going to Omaha, you must have some friends in the Midwest, and why don't we have the show go to some other institutions? So he then arranged, and he went to Wichita, Salt Lake, and now here. He was the one that picked all the artists. I don't exercise any editorial control. And what I loved about what he did is, in addition to the Donald Judd and the Chuck Close and the Richard Serra and the Kara Walker and the Jasper Johns and all the biggest of the artists, he also picked two artists that are very close to my heart, and we have in our collections. Joe Feddersen, who's part of the Coville tribe. We love his work. There's some glass pieces in the other room. And Rick Bartow, who I just idolize, who we have a number of his works in our office upstairs. In one conference room, we have one of his big paintings and charcoal and so forth, a number of his sculptures. And I was so thrilled that Jack Becker, not Jordan, because I could have loved to have said to him, gee, can't you please include some of our Northwest artists who I think are just as good as anything in New York or anything anywhere else. But he did it on his own. And that pleased me because I think Rick Bartow is as good as anybody in here. But he wasn't in New York. He didn't have Larry Gagosian for a dealer. He didn't get promoted like you know, Andy Warhol or whatever. He's okay. So it's wonderful that we have some of the best of our local artists with some of the best of the national artists. So with Rick, with that, why don't you come up and talk about this piece that's in our office and I get to see every day, and lead away, and then I'll finish up after that, because this is the real thing instead of my rambling on.
I just received the salmon here, so this is great. Maybe I've seen that. My late wife always really liked when I did sculpture because she had more places to hang the clothes. We had a baby. Sometimes I got that right. Precious, but at our house it was functional. The more sticking things out, the better. This is going to be about the bear, and so it was great that the salmon came now. Oh, we were on the river, the old man and I. The old man where we live is an honorific, calling him in a very good way. The old man, for 3 years of our life together, I was just, hey you, because I was at time to help with the farm. But I was hungry about knowledge, about spiritual, about other lives than being alcoholic, in which I was previously, 30-some years before. And the old man became a bear. In our lives, we all thought of him as a bear. And after he was gone, one day in the ceremony, after about probably a third of my life, I stood putting up with him and sitting with the old man, learning, and putting up with too much Denison extra hot chili. We would get done with ceremony and then we would watch wrestling on TV. It was a life day, you know, it was our way of living. But we worked with our hands. And we worked in the woods. We had a reverence of this. The bear became my life through my grandpa Johnny. He wasn't allowed to buy alcohol, couldn't, I don't think he probably even wrote books or wrote with it. And he wasn't allowed to vote. But his two sons, twin sons, my dad and my uncle, they were veterans, and they worked on the river, and they worked in the woods. Early on, when I was 4 or 5, the bear came into our life. The bear came into our life, and he's still in my life. Granddad Johnny shot a bear, had a picture of him on the woodshed. And everything that wasn't fried or boiled was smoked. Everything got used. and then the smell was in my body as a little child. And the bear came down the river, and I heard a bee like in my ear. And I went down to the river, and the old man was gone. And when the old man left, after 18, 19 years, he told me what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to do it. Nobody gets hurt, and we're only there to help people to get well. So the bear is a strong medicine. Mostly it's woman, doctor. But with the old man, we thought it was Granddad Walt coming back, still with us. He had a sense of humor, but he had sharp bites. It's when I dropped a big cherry tree on his tool shop. And about an hour later, I dropped it on a house, a little house filled with jars for canning. He once said before we left that we didn't always see eye to eye, but we seemed to stay full as friends. So, in our hands it came, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, little song, and it disappeared down the head. And the way we think about that, I'm Wiak with my grandpa. We heard that song get smaller and smaller going down the river. To our way going west is the game to where we're going, to whatever's coming. And as he left a song. And that song we use to help relax people. So people maybe get scared or get a little too anxious and nervous about ceremony. In our way, we sing it that song to help you rest. So the bear came into our house. It wasn't art, it was food. And it was much, much any other things than the bear. To go on, to go on. So my mother said that Ricky seems to daydream a lot. I have an old, I think I still have an old card house with the grades, and it said Ricky seems to spend too much time dreaming. I do and did. So the bear came into our life, and I was marked because I was not deemed much of anything else. I didn't do so well in logging. Mom said no. Yeah. The old man, my dad, died when I was 5. So my way was on the boats, starting out when I was a kid, working in a fishing boats. Started out when I was 16. And the fish they find now with the DNA, they found that this piece of wood right here probably has remnants of salmon in there. Because the eagle and the other animals take the carcass up to 100 miles inland to eat their fish, their flesh. And what is left is used for the animal, or the plant rather, for its nourishment. So it's nourishment, nourishment. And so it's the inside pieces, like bones broken maybe, but also thinking about xylem and phloem. We left the work of the car, of the truck, or of the chainsaw in there, just because I didn't feel like doing anything to it.
Nice rhythm.
Yeah, well, thank you. Maybe it's part of the song. The bear, we don't think of them as horrible. We think of them as peaceful. We think of the grandmother of the nurse, of the doctoring. When the first doctors, that the people of us came, we watched to the bear to learn for the medicine, for the roots, for the mud, for this and that. We think that the native people remembered her and observing and saw what was going on, and they would try and then would begin to learn about medicine. So the bear was there, and he's with us, and he's got stories inside. I was showing the kids so you can see inside the old bugs were in her. They were carving in there. I just recently got 2 stone Paleolithic hand axe and a little like a chisel that I just found in a junk store. So I've had jade tools from New Zealand, from the Maori people, carving, grooving away, taking things away, and not so much as taking away as putting things back. So we put things back. But now that I've already talked, I told them it was a little difficulty following the same kids, you know, with their story, but we'd say to the north, to the east, to the south, and to the west, above us, below us, and all around us, grandfather, grandmother, great peer, you know, Kuteri, Kukwi, that one above the clouds, would say thank you for this man that comes among us and is so generous with us and smart to figure out how to make it happen so that we get to have that flesh to us, that know to us, the news. In the old days, they said that whenever people out from outside would come together, we would all gather away today, like Jordan, that we would join together because we didn't have TV and the phone, so we'd listen to people from outside come and give us talk, and we would learn that way and share. And the more we share, the way the Maori said, it gets stronger man, the medicine gets bigger man with us. This is just one man. I'm not preaching, I don't care if you even listen. It's just gonna do we're gonna do here for a while anyway. So anyway, I'd like you to join us here. Come on, you can stand up and start circling around, and I'll tell you more about the bear. The bear joined us one time, the people, and they gathered together for help. And they get rid of the cast off the sadness or the negative, get away from it. And so the man gave himself to them and he became the bear and walked amongst the people and began as the little children. And then, you know, going down into the core of the matter, down in there where the elders were. And so the bear began to sing. And we'll do this, and then you get the yell in the end. The kids liked it, I don't know. Sometimes I find that adults are even better than kids. So we start, and he walks like the wall, the bear. So you come around this behind me, you see.
Can you get that over there?
This is Commander, this is art. The chant that we're singing, the man brought down from Sacramento to share with us. And what it means is that it's a song of preparation. So the prayer of our preparation is that you people now coming back. So anyway, at the end of the song, you stop and then you face and you put your hands up by your head and you say, "Ha!" And that's contemporary art.
Is that a treat or what? So let's do this, if I can indulge you for another minute. Let's go to the other gallery and I'll finish for 3 minutes in there to get you all in the other gallery and we'll finish up. And the Rick again. Let's go to the other galleries.
Okay. So a couple things we just experienced, and what I want to just do is finish by telling you, I've already told you why I like contemporary art, but tell you my reaction and why I like one or two of these artists to see the approach I take to the work, which is different than the curators. What we just saw with Rick Bartow was that wonderful journey, hearing from the source as to why he did what he did with that piece. Now, until today, and he was talking to these kids, I hadn't heard him talk about his work. And oftentimes it's hard to get artists, if you go to an artist and say, well, tell me what's the meaning of this, they generally don't and shouldn't answer you because that'll blow it. Because if they tell you what they think is in it, that takes away that wonderful, unique experience of each of us seeing the art, whatever we want to see. But he gave lots of clues today to me, and I was entranced today, as the kids were, as I was tonight, about seeing this man that spent his life and is pouring his guts out to tell us and give us his experiences of his life's journey in that work. In the same way, when I look at artists' work, I say a couple things. It's tough to be an artist, okay? Not only do you have to have something inside you that's burning to come out, some message, but you've got to figure out a way to do it that's been different. If we had a painting up here that looked like Da Vinci or looked like Matisse, well, there's already been a Matisse, there's already been a Da Vinci. So if you want to be an artist, you've got to have something that you're willing to bare your soul as he did and put your guts on canvas, on paper, in lead, in wood, and you've got to figure out a way to do it that's different than hasn't been done. One of the fifth graders today looked at that Donald Judd in the other room and he said, well, is that art? He said, I could do that. And I said, well, you probably could, but Donald Judd did it first. So when I look at an artist's work, first thing I begin to do is, I just react to it. I just don't think, I just feel. But then as I begin to look at the work and start this journey in me, I begin to think about the artist and their time and place, when they were born. The more you learn about the artist, the more you can begin to expand, I think, one's appreciation for the work. Now, if we look right now at this wonderful work by Lorna Simpson. Lorna Simpson was born in 1960, okay? And she, along with Kara Walker in the other room, and Ellen Gallagher, one or two others, African-American women that are in their late 30s and early 40s, are at the top of the heap in terms of the major African-American black artists working today. Now, if you think about when she was born, in 1970 she was 10, 1980 she was 20. I said earlier, artists are chroniclers of our time. What she's reflecting here is this continual tension and dynamic, I think, the way I see this work, about race relations, prejudice, about stereotypes. Okay? Now, I think I am totally gender neutral. I am totally unbiased. I don't have, racial prejudices, and yet when I first saw this work, I immediately jumped to all these conclusions. I think like each one of you do. When you look at this work, how can you not think, gee, that's a black person, that's this, that's this, that's this. And then you see this blonde one, and she really screws us up with that one, doesn't she, okay? Wow, what's that, okay? And then you see over here this straightened hair. One of the works by Ellen Gallagher that is in the collection that's at another exhibition right now is 60 ebony covers that had all those ads from Ebony magazine in the 60s where there were for hair straightening products and for products to whiten your skin and so forth. And she's manipulated those covers in 60 of them. It's a whole wall. And it just hits you with, my gosh, were expectations such that people couldn't be who they were, that they had to be something different to be acceptable and so forth. Well, she's hitting us with this same theme too, just as Kara Walker is dealing with the race relationships and slavery and the pickaninny and the slave master and inequality in relationships. And this Lorna Simpson is just amazing. First, it's done on felt, okay, very tactile material. And then she has these images plus these words. So I think what I do when I see work is I tend to always, in my mind, begin to translate things into themes, because in the end, for me, what happens with art is it takes me away from my life. It's like a little mini vacation. I mean, there are times I wake up and I think I have all the issues in the world. I have a daughter, 15 and 17. My father passed away 3 years ago. My mother's having a tough time. Went through a tough recession with our real estate business. Coming out fine, thank God. I mean, you name it, okay? Like everybody else in this room. Which of you don't wake up with your pack of problems, right? Remember when you were in like your early 20s, you thought, gee, I'll solve a few problems, then life will be great. And you solved a few, and then a few more came along, and suddenly you get to be middle-aged and you realize, my God, is this what it's like, okay? So the fact is, life is always challenging. Agreed? So for me, the reason why art is so wonderful and such a fabulous refuge is we can go to it. The museum's free here. There's art in public places. You can go to it anywhere. And you can experience it and get away from yourself and have these brilliant, brilliant artists like Lorna Simpson, like Rick Bartow, like Sol LeWitt, like Roy Lichtenstein over here, and I'll talk about that one in a second, okay? And let them do their magic to you. Because ultimately, Roy Lichtenstein talked about the most important influence in his life was a Professor Hoyt Sherman at the University of Ohio, where he got his undergraduate master's degrees. And Hoyt Sherman, he says, taught him how to see. That's what these artists are trying to do. They're trying to help us see our lives and our world around us better in our own unique way. And the reason it's unique is each one of us is a unique individual. In other words, we're all the sum of all the life experiences we've had. Parents, sisters, brothers, school, education, husbands, kids, travel, everything that makes us all unique. So when each of us come to these works, we're already preloaded with all those life experiences. And that's why the two of you will totally see each of these works totally differently, because you've had different life experiences. And that's what's wonderful about art. Okay? So I guess I'll talk about Lichtenstein, but what I see, for instance, in this work that's amazing to me is Roy Lichtenstein, as we know, was born in the 20s. He was one of the leaders of the pop art movement, the post-World War II movement, where they were all reflecting a whole bunch of the themes of that time. Think about that period for a second. The abstract expressionists were the big artists that when they were in art school, the Rothko and all those guys, they were the big artists that they were looking up to and saying, boy, they're getting the big shows, they're pushing the envelope, they're really important. But these guys, Andy Warhol, Lichtenstein, Rauschenberg, Jim Dine, they all came along and they couldn't do abstract expressionist work because that had already been done. They needed to come up with new stuff. So they did this sort of pop art work that really was reflecting the time of post-World War II. Servicemen and women were coming home. Levitt towns were springing up. TV was starting to get in everybody's home. Mass marketing and advertising was just beginning to explode on Madison Avenue. Everyone was being told what Chevrolet to wear, Clairol hair, all the problem, all those things. So I think those pop artists tend to deal with the themes of that time, of how does the individual keep one's identity and develop one's identity when you're being bombarded by mass merchandising. Now, in the case of this work, this is fascinating because, like many artists, most artists, they often paid homage to another artist. Picasso did a series of bulls prior to Lichtenstein, and he did the same 6 images where he starts off with a very representational bull, and then he deconstructs it, and it's amazing. And the last image, in Picasso's own way, is totally unrecognizable as a bull. So Roy Lichtenstein, not copying...
6 dimensions.
Well, he had a lot of dimensions. So Roy Lichtenstein, not trying to copy Picasso, but paying homage to him, honoring him, did his own stylized version of the same thing.
In 2.
Huh?
In 2. He broke it up into flat space.
He does. he does, he starts off with the first image that we all would recognize as a bull, and then he starts pulling it apart, till finally the last piece is totally abstract. Now when I see that, aside from historically seeing how he's paying homage to Picasso, what I see is a similar message to Lorna Simpson, and that is that we all have a reaction when we see that bull. And one message that I'm getting out of his work is, hey, look around you. Abstract art is all around you, not just in museums, not just on paper and canvases. Look around at those fabulous mountains around this community. God, they're the most gorgeous abstract shapes you've ever seen. Second of all, bulls, just like us people, maybe we're made of lots of complex parts and pieces. And don't be so quick to just simply judge a bull as just a bull. Maybe it's a complicated bull, just like we're complicated people. Anyway, this is the kind of process I take to all these artists, that I really, really love the work. And the last message to finish up is just how important this institution is in your support of it. Yes, I think my gut sense is you'll always remember this moment of what Rick Bartow just did. You may or may not remember some of the works in the show, but that was pretty darn special, okay? And the key today, I think, more than ever, is I talked about the Madison Avenue, the 50s, and you look at the age of people here, and where's that Sarah, who's the youngest one here? Where'd she go? Okay, huh? There, she's right there. You get the award for being the youngest one here, okay? I think, okay? We won't talk about who the oldest is, but you get the award for the youngest, okay? Well, in a day and age when, like my daughters who are 15 and 17, these smartphones are absolutely glued to their hand, okay? They know every friend of theirs, what they're doing, what they're listening to, where they're going, what party, whatever. I mean, the newspaper the other day said the kids today are spending 7.8 hours a day on their phones and in front of the screens, okay? Now, we thought it was bad growing up in the 50s and 60s, having TV and having print ads and whatever. Nothing like today. Nothing. So in a day and age, because this is a pitch about support for the museum and kids, in a day and age when these young people are being, we said bombarded in the 50s, they're now immersed in information all the time. How do they find their identity? How do they find themselves? How do they determine and develop their values? Well, I think a critical way more than ever is through art. So those programs like bringing in those fifth graders like the mayor was talking about are just more important than ever. And I usually use the example which I did today and I did yesterday, so I won't today, but I'll often say when we have shows in the West, I'll say, tell me, do you remember the first time you went to a museum? And someone in Boise or Portland or Missoula usually will say, yeah, I remember. And I'll say, do you remember the first time you saw a mountain? And people like us in Portland, we grew up in Mount Hood, always been there. You're ringed with mountains, okay? But you ask people from back east who grew up in Manhattan when they went to a museum first. They can't remember. Their parents dragged them to the Modern Museum when they were little. You ask them when they saw the first mountain, invariably they'll say, yeah, my parents took a trip and I remember that. So part of this journey is if I can help work with fabulous people like Laura and the staff and Steve, all the people, everybody, and help get this world-class art to these less-served communities, and then help fund additional money, and with all of your support, fund more money to bring the kids in, since all the school districts have had to cut back their art budgets so much. If we can work together to get the kids in, like the fabulous program today where they saw the art and then made little mini prints, then you're really helping to that next generation, as best you can, develop their values, their sense of identity, and develop a passion for something that might help stabilize them through all the issues they're going to go through in life. So thanks for being supporters of the museum. Thanks for coming tonight, and please tell all your friends, your neighbors, kids, anybody. You won't wear out the work once they've gone to all the work of hanging it. Too many eyes aren't going to wear out the work. The shame is that when the show closes in June, what is it, June? I think it's early June.
Not enough people will see it.
That's right.
May 31st.
May 31st, okay. That would be the shame. If you tell someone, did you see it, and they say no, and you say, boy, you missed something great, that's the tragedy. So help get all the people in. Thank you for coming.
board and the community of Missoula, I just want to say thank you so much. You're providing a valuable asset to our community, and we couldn't be happier.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Please join me again. Thank you so much.
All right.
So, please.
On with the evening.
Let's chat. Great.